Hello there, everyone. Welcome to the Real Life Process Podcast with your host, Teresa McCloy. It is so great to be back with you on this episode of the podcast. And we have a kind of a special treat for you today. If you're a first-time listener, this is not our normal podcast, but we don't like to always do things normal around here. So we hope you'll enjoy it. I'm actually going to share with you a recording that our marketing director, Lindsay, Sterchi, and I did inside of our Facebook community just a couple of weeks ago. We go live inside of our private Facebook community, the Real Life Process community, and just share kind of real life with you. We do it every Wednesday, sometime between 10 a.m. and noon Central. We're on live and just sharing life with you from our perspectives and how things are going for us. And one of the things we recently talked about was our guiding word for the year. Now, I did a podcast episode about this a couple of episodes back and walked you through how I choose my word for the year, but we thought it would be fun to actually then share with you kind of our reflections from last year's word, and then also what we're choosing for this year and how we're going to let that word guide us and kind of how we come to those words. So I really thought this would be a great podcast episode to share this audio from the Facebook Live conversation, because you get a couple of perspectives from both Lindsay and I, how we do it different, how our personalities are unique and different. And we just want to be real with you and be present with you as maybe you continue this invitation to lean in to a guiding word. So now that I've set it up, I'm going to play for you the audio that we have from this Facebook Live. We would love to have you come over there and join us in that community if you're not there. And I just want to share with you this audio and have you just hear from both of us about how our words will guide us this year. Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Facebook Live here in the Real Life Process community in 2023. So welcome, Lindsay.
Hey, it's so good to be back. We've missed hanging out in this space.
It is. It's great to be back. I know you and I are both doing a little check to make sure all the technology is doing the thing. And yes, it is great to be back. It feels like it's been a really long time.
It has been a long time.
It has been a long time. So if you're new to our Facebook community or you're catching us for the first time, we try to come in live every Wednesday for 10 or 15 minutes, sometime between 11 o'clock and 12 o'clock, 10:30 to noon. Let's put it that way. So on Wednesday mornings, we also have our certified facilitator call and some other things that we're doing. And so we're a little flexible. Usually Lindsay posts it as to when we're coming. And for us, I would say, Linz, it's not so much about you joining us live, although we love when you can do that. And if you're scrolling through social media and you see that we're live, come hang out with us. It's more about watch later, post down below, have your comments, let's have some interaction. And we're just showing up to share with you our everyday, ordinary life and kind of what's going on a Wednesday and what we're processing through. So
Yeah. Whether you're live or joining us later, we love to hear from you guys. So it's always fun to go back and see, because we're talking about, like today, our guiding word for the year. And I love to go back later and hear from you guys and what you're processing with that. So please comment, even if you're joining us later.
Yes. So this is just about creating connection and community and hearing from each other and a way that we can engage. We know to see our faces and hopefully hear our voices helps you to feel comfortable to engage in the chat as well. So we are going to talk about our word for the year. We actually started these back in November when the book was launching. And we were like, hey, let's engage as part of the book launch. And we heard from some of you, and we also just enjoy doing it. So that's kind of where this was born out of as well. I think I did a podcast a few weeks ago about choosing a guiding word for the year. And it's interesting. I've even had some people on social media recently go, do you really need a word for the year? Like, my word is chicken. I'm like, okay, let's not make fun of the practice, because I do find it helpful and useful. So I do have a podcast episode a few weeks back. Don't know for sure.
I'll put the link in the comments too.
Okay.
And that has a download with it too. That's very helpful. Kind of walks you through the process of how to do it too.
Yes. So we have that resource if you want it. And then next week on the podcast, not the one that dropped today, but next week, I'm actually going to share more about my guiding word and what that is and how that came to be. So you guys get it first right here in the community. You're going
breaking news.
The breaking news. Yes. So Lindsay, why don't you read us a little bit, or lead us, not read, lead a little bit through our discussion of this for a few minutes.
Yeah, so you kind of alluded to it a little bit, but I would love to hear your perspective on why choosing a guiding word for the year is helpful, why this is a practice that you engage in and something that you've done for several years now.
Yeah. So, and I'm not sure how I was first introduced to it. I believe that it came through my spiritual director in just what would be something you want to lean into. So for me, it often starts way before the beginning of the year. I just start to listen and hear themes or threads that are coming for me of like, so for last year, my word for the year was one another. And I really felt like, okay, one another. I usually always look for some guidance from scripture, but I'm also, last year I was leaning into our family, be kind to one another, just for us to show up. And really it was a challenge for me to just show up with kindness to my husband, to my daughter, son-in-law, my parents. Like, how do I want to show up kind? And then it was belong to one another in community with my friends. And there was one other place that I did it, but I broke it down in kind of 3 things. So sometimes it's not just a word, it's actually a phrase. Right. My very first guiding word I ever had was just be. And probably that was in 2015. And that was a difficult season in my life and in my spiritual direction, in my coaching. Was in a transition out of ministry into building this business, and, maybe a precursor even to the subtitle of our book, which is Live from Rest, Not Rush, of learning to just live in a different place. So I have kept track of my guiding words over the years. They're part of a kind of a journaling place that I keep on Google Drive. And it's been interesting to see those themes lived out. So yeah, the resource that we have is really a way that I come to my guiding word, but it starts long before like January 1.
Right.
We'll talk more about that, but yeah.
Yeah. So when you look, even like, for example, your word for last year, when you chose that, obviously there's a lot of unknowns in the year ahead. So as you choose that phrase, how did you see that play out through your year? How did that impact your focus?
I think it played out in lots of ways. It played out in the book launch last November. We did a huge event in September around the book launch. And, it was called Circle of Friends. And it really was a lot of me saying, gosh, I have all these different circles. I have our facilitator community of our people who use the process in the work that they do. I have a local circle. I have, my family and my friends. I have our team. I have a group of local networkers from a group that come together that are business owners, and we network together. So I had all these circles, and that phrase one another just really played out for me in that event and in that space, because there was nothing more life-giving to me than all of those people like pouring into one another and meeting new people. And I continue to hear conversations of like, oh, when I met them at your event. So that was a place. And then you and we talk about it. I talk about it this week on the podcast that releases today. As a team, we lost a team member and passed away from stage 4 lung cancer in a very short period of time, 5.5 months. And Terry had been a dear friend of both of ours. She'd worked on our team with us. So that word really played out there deeply. Had no idea. But because I had that word kind of running underneath, it became a place to go to. And I know that sounds weird, but a place to go, okay, this is about one another. Yeah. This is about just being present. There's a lot of things that we set aside as of August when Terry was diagnosed to just go, no, it's not about those things right now. It's about this. Yeah. And just being present for me, coming back to being kind, belonging, being in community, like one another. So it really played out. I don't know. What was your word for the year?
Yeah.
For you?
Well, one thing I was going to say too about what you just shared, I love how a year that you had a book coming out, that there was a lot of work that needed to be produced, and that helped you stay focused on people that, and we saw that. I feel like we saw that in, bringing all the communities together for the book launch, that so much of what stood out to me was the people that you were connected with. And so I just think that's such a cool thing, that in a year that could be focused on produce and drive and, we've got this big thing coming out, but that it was about the people. So I think that's a cool.
And that's always my challenge. And that's just part of my design. It's part of what I know about myself. And I think that's another part of your guiding word can be, what do you know about you? You know you need something grounded. So how about you? What was your word last year?
So, and I think that relates to my word for sure, of something that I need to grow. And so my word for last year was expand. And I had a specific definition for that word. My definition that I came up with was to expand means to fill the space God has for me.
Ooh, love that.
And so, I am the type that I will more naturally kind of hold back maybe, or doubt, being able to move forward into a space. There's just a lot of new things last year, both in my work and in my life, that I felt like God was inviting me to grow into. And so I feel like for me, my tendency is maybe to shrink back and hold back out of fear or whatever else. And so the invitation was to expand, to show up. And it wasn't about being bigger than God's called me to be. It wasn't about that. To me, it was God has a space for me, and the invitation is to show up and to fill that space that is uniquely suited for me. And so I felt like I saw that in a lot of things, even from a work standpoint, as we launched the book last year, there was a lot of things to learn and to grow in as I came alongside you in leading the launch team and just leading the marketing with that. And so there was an invitation to show up fully in confidence and believing that I was capable. And so there was just a lot of invitation of that to just show up as who God's made me to be.
Yeah, I love that. And so part of the work of a word too is, as we're reflecting, both of us, is to go back and say, how did that play out? So that can be kind of that examine part, from a spiritual practice part of, or that gratitude piece of like, gosh, that word really was helpful and impactful and real for me and very present. Those are some of our values, the real, the present, the joy, the impact. And that word, if you will let it, and so there's a whole part of it, as people make fun of the practice of a guiding word, if you will let it be a guiding word, if you will let it be a part of your deeper life, your prayer life, your practice life, that's where I see the word sit, is in my quiet, in my practice. And I love that you talked about, I had my own definition. So make the word your own. One of the things I do is I will look up the definition of the word, and, I will look up the synonyms, because is that the right word, or is there something similar to that? So that's been a part of my process, even as I was finding my new word or phrase for this year in that. So let's kind of move to, what are we doing this year?
Yes.
So you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to. So I almost felt, as I was, like you said, towards the end of last year, was starting to think about what word I wanted to use. And there was a word that kept coming up for me.
I feel like we need a drum roll.
We do. We need it.
There's my best drum roll.
So it was interesting because I felt like I wasn't done with the word expand, but there was a deeper level to it. And so it's a similar word. Even the first two letters are the same. So my word for this year is explore.
Ooh.
And so I almost felt
I love that you did that, because as you were saying expand, I'm like, there's still more, because we have so many things we want to share with you right now that we can't yet.
Yes, there is.
That are coming in the next couple of months.
Yes.
So I love that you're staying in that space. So tell me about explore.
Yeah. So I almost feel like there is still more expanding to do. There is more to grow into the space that God has for me. But it almost felt like this invitation of now that there is an expansion, and as I step into that space, there's an invitation to explore what is there and to discover what the new layers are in that. And, I did similar things where I looked up the definition where some of the definitions are about it's for the purpose of discovery, that we can search out something, that we can examine something. And so I think for me, the idea of explore is not about arriving at a destination or getting answers. For me, a lot of my work is to let go of trying to fix something or figure it out. But this is an invitation to be curious about what is there and to learn from it and to see, what do I need to let go of? What do I need to take on? And it just feels very inviting to me. It feels very freeing that I don't have to get somewhere or get it done or figure it out, but I can explore. I can see what's there. And it just feels very freeing to me. And I think that's, for me, a huge thing with a word of the year is that it doesn't feel like it carries pressure with it.
Like heaviness. Yeah.
Right. But it's an invitation that can bring freedom. So that's my word, explore.
It's great. Well, I'll share mine quickly before we hop off here. And if you're in the chat, if you're watching, feel free to comment. We'd love to bring you into the conversation. So my word actually comes from the last several months of walking with my friend through kind of some of her final days. And then as she passed on Christmas morning, I'm still kind of in that season. I'm in a season of grief. I'm in a place, I always believe that grief is a spiritual practice. We'll continue to grieve. You continue to walk in that place. But in the week after Terry passed on Christmas, and it's kind of a slower time, a slower place that I was able to have for my own personal journey, I just kept, coming with God and saying, so God, what is the invitation from this? From the 10 beautiful years that I got to spend with my friend, from all that she poured into my life, all that I learned, what's the invitation? And also the fear, right, of walking into the next season of life without her. And just what would that feel like? And so the word that came to me in all of that was go deeper in. Go deeper in with me. I have you. God has me. I'm invited deeper in. So in that, I'm like, that's just not quite it. But yet I'm sitting with it, right? And so I shared it with another little circle of friends that I have over Voxer, my little favorite app ever that brings my circles together because I love to hear people's voices. And so I shared it in that group. And one of my friends that lives in Mexico said to me, gosh, that reminds me of C.S. Lewis and the last book in the Chronicles of Narnia, where it's further up or further in, those two words together. And depending on how you read it, some places say farther up, farther in. Some say further up, further in. I'm like, ooh, I want to pay attention to that. So I sat with that for a while. And then strangely enough, and I just share the story to say these are all kind of the God wink moments of this is it. This is where you need to follow. This is the trail that you're on. You come to that fork in the road. What do I do? So for Christmas, an organization that I work with, Professional Christian Coaching Institute, my friend Chris McCluskey he's a huge C.S. Lewis fan, always sends us a C.S. Lewis book. And he sent me the whole series of the Chronicles of Narnia. I have not read them. Y'all can shame me for that, but not read the Chronicles of Narnia. Okay, yeah. So Lindsay and I we haven't read C.S. Lewis. I know about it. I know what the story is. Of course, I've seen all of the things, but I've not explored it, using your word, to the depths. So I'm like, okay, second kind of God moment. Then just this week, I saw an invitation by someone that I follow online about a play of C.S. Lewis of Further Up, Further In. And so in the last just 2 weeks, I have had 4 or 5, I could tell several other stories, confirmations of follow this breadcrumb trail of this word. Yeah. So my word for the year, and I'm going to show it just real quick. Lindsay's going to leave the screen. So is further up and deeper in. And so as I looked up those definitions, you see it there, the willingness. So to me, it's about being willing to make progress and lean in at a greater depth. And then I always make a little graphic. And so you see the mind, heart, body. I'll post this in the chat so you can see it there in better detail. But how am I invited to make progress in my mind, in my emotions, and in my body? And then the tree that you saw is actually a graphic drawn by my friend Terry. So that just means a lot to me, of the idea of, and her and I used to talk about that drawing all the time, the idea of the leaves and the expansion, but also the further in and the depths and the roots of when a tree grows really deep roots and goes deep in, that it can go further. So further is about expansion and progress. Farther is just a distance. Well, I just don't want to go a distance. I want to make progress, lean in, and expand. So that's my phrase for the year is further up and deeper in. And
I love that so much.
Yeah. And so if your word connects to a story, to something going on in your life that's just an invitation, pay attention. See the connections of, well, I've heard that more than once. I still have some work to do because I still want to find some scriptures to where God's speaking to that. My challenge, I'm going to say it on Facebook Live, so it's going to be true. My challenge is also for Dale and I to read the Chronicles of Narnia this year and to read the series. It may be on Audible, it may be book, it may be a combination of both. But that's something of that deeper in aspect to me too, of us doing some of that together and learning and growing in knowledge and wisdom and all of those things. So put some action to your word would be another part of this. So gosh, we may just take this and make it the podcast episode, Lindsay. I don't know. Like this may just be, but what a rich discussion. And we want to hear from you. So share it in the chat with us. Send us an email, Teresa@thereallifeprocess.com, Lindsay@thereallifeprocess.com. We want to hear from you. Let this be. It's not too late to do this. Like, you know, it doesn't have to be in a year. You could do this in March. Like, it's about letting it guide you and help you flesh out growth and discovery. So explore and further up and deeper in. So,
it's 2023,
friend. It's 2023. We're going, and you see, this is not January 1st for us. This is, 10 days in, and we're just getting there and just discovering. So don't put the pressure on yourself.
Right.
But if the invitation is right, take the invitation and explore some more. Lindsay will drop the podcast episode I've already done, so you can get that resource next week. I'll be sharing more, even from this conversation or this conversation. We'll see where it goes. Yeah, I'll also put a picture of my graphic there so you can just see. I just did that in Canva. It's just fun for me to have a visual. I put that in with some other things that I capture for the year. And I'll print it out and put it in some different places in my home and that type of thing too. So thanks, Lindsay.
Yep. Thanks, everybody. Excited to read your words in the chat. So
and we'll be back next week, somewhere between 10:30 and noon. We'll be hopping in. It's not always exact same time, depending on our schedule, but we try to get it done before noon on Wednesday so we can re-engage with you throughout the rest of the week as well. So great to be back with you. Lindsay, thanks so much for joining me, friend.
Hi, everybody.
Well, I hope you enjoyed just hearing a little bit from Lindsay and I in a different way, much more casual, much more laid back, just hanging out together in a conversation. Now, that's one of the things that I value the most. I've traveled a little bit last week or so and got to be in person with people, just having some deep and meaningful conversations. And that is the kind of community and the kind of life that we want to live into. Just being souls in God's presence together and doing a different rule of life. How do we live from a place of rest, not a place of rush? And so as Lindsay and I lean into these words, as we hear from you, and come on over to the Facebook group if you'd like to engage with us there. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear your questions and your comments. around this idea of a practice of a guiding word. Hanging out with Lindsay is one of my favorite things to do. It's one of my extraordinary moments, and we just invite you, as we do each and every week, to remember that every ordinary day has an extraordinary moment. You just have to look for them. We'll be back next week for the Real Life Process podcast. You can always connect with us over on our website at thereallifeprocess.com and check us out there. Check us out on social media, and we'll be back next week with more from the podcast.